We'll be starting up here in about another minute or so. We'll see how this all works with technology. So good morning and welcome from the left coast. I'm David Orr. I'm the director here with the New York State LTAP, the Cornell Look Birds program. And today we're going to be doing a little bit on ethics, some ethical dilemmas, and we're going to ask you what you would do, some ethical choices. And I'm actually doing it from Seattle, Washington. I'm actually out here for the conference of LTAP centers around the country. And we rotate where the conference is this year, where we were supposed to be 2 years ago, is in Seattle, Washington. So hopefully technology will let this work. We'll see how that goes. We are going to be using Poll Everywhere today. So take a couple of minutes. You can go on the web and go to pollev.com/DavidOrPE. You can download the app if you'd like to and do it on your phone. We'll be doing that during the hour together. This is a PDH worthy class, so if you stay on for most of the class, over 95%, we'll give you a PDH. We'll talk about how to do that at the very end. Now let's start with a little bit on ethics. And actually, let me start one more thing before I go too far. I should be able to see you guys raise your hands. That's one of the things inside here. The chat pod's been disabled, but the Q&A is open, but you should also be able to raise your hand. So if a few of you raise your hand just to see if that works for me. Yay, it's working. Okay, that's good to know. I just wanted to make sure I can see that. Though it's not the same as it's on the desktop. It's just weird how technology works. Okay. The Q&A is available, so you can put in questions in the Q&A and we'll answer those as you go along. If you have anything issues with technology or anything like that, put them in there. Now, before we get into some of the polls and stuff, remember ethics is what people measure. We can write laws about ethics, but ethics is quite a variety of different things. Even pirates had a form of ethics. Actually, interestingly enough, pirates actually had a form of democracy as well in terms of who got what shares and who actually was the captain. Captains could be voted out of, I guess, office. I'm not sure what they would call that. But ethics is an interesting issue. And what is ethics? How do we define ethics is something that we could spend a lot of time on, but instead what we're going to focus on is the kind of ethical dilemmas that we deal with on a day-to-day basis when we're dealing with highway and engineering and things like that. And I found this cartoon and got permission to share it with you. So always fun to talk about people cheating when they're talking about ethics. Now, when we set this up back when this became a requirement in New York State to have an ethical class for professional development hours for engineers, we got a whole bunch of our dilemmas and information from some books. And there's a handout that Amanda may throw into the chat pod. You can open the chat pod and she'll do that during the hour. It's a PDF of the resources that we pulled together when we were putting this together. And some places you might want to go on the web to look things up if you have ethical questions. Well, as she's doing that, the beginning of one of the books actually had a thing in the ethical engineer. It was a notice that said you were supposed to do the ethical thing provided there was no legal duty to do otherwise. And you think about that. If something is unethical, whatever the law says, should we really be doing it? I mean, shouldn't we be doing the ethical thing first? And maybe we should be thinking about changing the laws. So it's an interesting dilemma that we get ourselves into sometimes. So let me just check here. Up the resources in the chat pod. So Amanda's able to get that over there for you. So that's good. Now, some of the ethical dilemmas that I'm going to share with you today, I actually got from a gentleman by the name of Ted Green. He's with the New Jersey LTAP Center. He's also out here in Seattle. But I want to give credit where credit is due. And we've traded back and forth on some of these things. We keep adding and subtracting and having a little bit of fun. Now, just to make sure everything's in good shape, to make sure this is working like it should, we're going to start with a single choice question. And I'm wondering if somehow, well, let's just see if this works. Yeah, there we go. I work for, who do you work for? Let's see. It didn't clear itself. Let me see if I can get it to clear. I'm going to clear the responses and make you do it again. There you go. So we have town, county, village, state, consultants, a lot of consultants, probably because you need that PDH. Somebody put in the Q&A village. Okay. Well, it's good. Nobody here is working for the weekend. Up there we go. We got a couple people working for the weekend. That's always good. Okay, cool. Okay, so we're working for a variety of folks, mostly of consultants, but that's good to see. Okay. Your job title. Okay, so what is your job title? I'm guessing most of you are going to be engineers, but you may have some supervisors, maybe some highway officials in there too. Okay, and sure enough, about 2/3 up, 3/4 of you are engineers. Quite a few are other things. And let's see. I've got somebody put in the Q&A pod that they're an administrator. Okay, good. And then finally, we'll put in the last of the early questions. Where are you from? Okay, so you can actually click on the map and tell me where you're from. I would have to put one out way off screen here, way on the left at the moment, but let's see where you're from. We got someone from Pennsylvania, a bunch of folks down in the city area, a couple of folks across the border. Oh, what happened? I didn't even push a button, it cleared itself. We'll have to remember where those things were. Okay, technology being technology. Here they go. Okay. Okay, so we got a variety of folks from all over the country, mostly engineers, but a few others. Someone's on their boat in Lake Ontario. That's good. Okay. So there may be some critical choice questions that I'm going to come up with later on. This is a case whereby when I read the ethical dilemma to you, there's more than one thing you would do. I want you to put in the most critical answer if that's the only choice that I'm giving you. So an example of that is when you go to a conference, I'm at a conference, what kind of things can you pick up? That's actually technically called swag. You know, it's a pirate term, but it is actually the term for it. What swag do you typically pick up? And you should be able to put in more than one, even though it just shows us overall percentages. I'm not quite sure how that works. But yeah, most people pick up pins, coasters. You know, we sling coasters at people when we're live. We have recycling bags. Yep, I got myself a bag. They had a bag yesterday. So key rings, candy. Okay. Okay, so I think everybody's got pole everywhere under their belts. So let's start talking about some of the stuff in terms of ethics. Now, every organization that gets large typically has a code of ethics. Cornell University has a code of ethics. In terms of engineering, the most common ones you'll see out there are the Professional Engineers Society, NSPE, and the American Society of Civil Engineers. They have canons. I've actually looked through canons for mechanical, electrical, a few other of the engineering associations. They all have some similarities to them, interestingly enough. There's a lot of overlap. All of them, every canon I've ever seen, every ethical thing I've ever seen starts with a phrase that comes around from the idea that safety, health, and welfare of the public come first. So, you know, if that's true, great. And that really should drive what we do, safety, health, and welfare of the public. And that's good. Almost all the canons, if you think about this, is perform services only in the area of competence. Now, from an engineering standpoint, that means what are you going to stamp? But for those of you who aren't engineers, that means if you start getting outside of what you're good at, go get some help. You know, if you're good at running equipment, great. But if you're not, go get some help. If you're building a wall that's taller than you need, go find the engineer. But make sure that an engineer knows how to design the wall properly, that he's not an electrical engineer or a structural guy and doesn't do retaining walls. So keep that in mind. Issue objective and truthful public statements. When you're talking to the public, whether it's through the press or just one-on-one, be objective. Tell the truth. Don't cover things up. If you can't say something because of a legal requirement, do so, but don't hide behind that just because, oh, I can just say that. I can't say that. Be honest, be truthful. It actually goes a long way for respect and rapport. Now we start getting into some conflicts, and there are people who will actually tell you you shouldn't have canons because it creates these conflicts. And here's the first one of them that really does sometimes cause conflicts. Act for your employer or client as a faithful agent or trustee. In other words, serve your employer, serve who you work for. But what if they don't want you saying an objective and truthful public statement? What do you do then? I mean, that's why we have whistleblower laws in some cases. But it is something you got to think about. If you don't have a conflict with the things before, your first and primary duty is to your employer, your client. So got to keep that in mind. To help with this, a lot of things we can do is avoid deceptive acts or conflicts of interest. Try to avoid those situations where we're put into choosing between two bad choices. And some of the ethical dilemmas we've got today, I'll deal with that kind of issue. And then uphold and enhance the honor, integrity, and dignity of the engineering profession. And again, if you're not an engineer, same thing still holds true. Do things that are going to get you respect. Uphold honor and integrity. Do the right thing. We all know this. We all learned it in kindergarten. But here we're writing it down in a little bit more formal document. And here's a perfect example of the kind of things that people should never say. This was said in 2014 in Flint, Michigan. The city government said Flint water is safe to drink. When they had evidence, they knew that there were some issues with the water. We shouldn't be saying things like that. Tell the truth, be honest. It's not easy, but it's actually easier long-term if you're upfront with people. I remember when I was with Yates County, telling people that we might not get to their problem for a year made them angry. But when we got there in a year, they were happy. You told them 6 months and you didn't get there for a year, you made them even angry. So say the right thing. Don't say something that's not true. Now, you should have a policy. Every one of you should have a policy. If you work for an engineering firm, you're pretty much better have one. And if you're any large company, and even if you're working in the government sector, hopefully there's an ethical policy. Why do we have policies when it's really hard to enforce some of these things in ethics? It gives us a place to go when we do run into issues. And it should have things in there about whistleblowing and stuff like that. But what do you think should be in a good ethical policy? So type in an answer. In this case, we're going to create a Wordle. So one word at a time, and it's going to create a little word map, as they're called Wordles. Let's see what y'all come up with. What's a good ethical policy? What should be in here? They need their coffee, Amanda. I need my coffee. I haven't actually had my coffee. Service, okay. Yeah, that's actually not a bad thing to think about. Should be transparent. Yep. Okay. Let's see what other people say here. Okay. It should talk about charging time for those who are, charging your client. Yeah, okay. You should have a policy on that. Should be pretty comprehensive. It should make sure you tell the truth. Okay. Should give honesty behind it. Should be clear. I see clear is starting to dominate. Okay. Should have some common sense behind it. Someone put in the Q&A, and that's actually not a bad thing to think about. You can write something that's long and detailed and difficult. Nobody follows it because they don't even understand it. So yeah, it should have some common sense in it. It should have good moral standing behind it, good integrity. Yeah, these are all great things. A few other things to think about though. A good ethical policy does need to have in it some way for enforcement. It does need to have some mechanism behind it when somebody does something unethical. What are you going to do when that happens? Clear is definitely something that should be in there, but it should hold people accountable. And it should be something that's applicable to everybody. Everybody knows what the consequences are going to be, as someone put in the Q&A. Okay, so good answers. If your policy doesn't do these things, maybe you need to think about changing it. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, when I was in college, undergraduate days, I took a class on materials my senior year. It was co-taught by a brand new young associate professor and a full professor who was close to retirement and actually wore Hawaiian shirts. I got a picture of him, but I really wanted a picture of him in a Hawaiian shirt because that's what I knew him as. But he said something that when I was an undergraduate, of course, yeah, that won't happen. He said that all of us will have ethical dilemmas in our careers, in our lives. And he's right. We all will. So we need to keep that in mind. And what he also said was that you need to know what you would do before the ethical incident happens. It stuck with me. And he's right. When I've had ethical dilemmas in my career, or even outside of my personal life, if I've thought about it ahead of time, even just a little bit, and what I would do, how I would respond, it's much easier. When I have the situation where, oh boy, what do I got to do? I didn't even thought about this before. It's much harder. And it's easier to make a choice that later on you regret. So some ethical dilemmas, thinking about them ahead of time can really help us with our overall ethics and help us define what is our own ethics, our company's ethics, our personal ethics, our engineering ethics. Okay? So what we're going to do is a series of scenarios. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this. I may ask you some follow-ups on the Q&A, but we're going to go through some ethical dilemmas. All of these are actual dilemmas that myself, our friend Ted Green from New Jersey, Jeff Scott within our office, or others have sent to me over the years. So these are all real-world scenarios. Before we get into some critical points, things to remember, first off, whoops, went too far. There we go. They're overly simplistic. I'll admit, when a 1 hour thing, we're can't get into a lot of details. So I've simplified these quite a bit. The real world's going to sometimes have more nuance and more difficulty to it. So keep that in mind. It's sometimes in situations you might find that you want to do something slightly different. That's okay. I just want to make sure you get these things through your head. And finally, and lastly, if you're not sure, ask. It's easy enough. There are actually groups out there that can help you ask, that will help you figure out whether something is ethical. You can always talk to somebody at the water cooler, okay? So we'll go ahead and get started. Our first one is, we call it the retired engineer. Some of you have seen this before, may have heard about the retired engineer. You're done, you're down at the local Y or the gym or wherever you might be doing your workout post-COVID. And you see a guy who used to work for your company. He's over in the shower, finishing up for the day, I guess. But he's roughhousing with a boy, and it doesn't look right to you. It's like, wait a second, this old guy and this young kid, they don't know each other, they're not related. What's going on there? Get a little bit nervous. So what are you going to do? Are you going to stop the roughhousing? Are you going to think, I really need to call the cops? Are you going to report the incident to the people who run the gym? You're going to walk away and say nothing? Are you going to try to talk to the guy later on? You know him. You're going to go talk to him later on. What are you going to do? Okay. So most of you are choosing either report the incident, stop the roughhousing, and yes, you might do more than one thing, but what's the first thing you're going to do? Okay. Okay. Now I bring this particular issue up, and you're split about 50-50 between roughhousing and reporting the incident. Okay. And almost all of us usually vote that way when I show this to people. But I bring this up for a reason. What this one is actually the Penn State case. You've probably all heard of it, okay? With the assistant who did report to his supervisors what he saw in this particular case. He did really the right thing. That's not the issue. The issue is the Lancet, it's a journal out of Great Britain. It's the same as our American Medical Association. They did a study and they found 25% of people who are trained to look for abuse in a situation would have probably walked away and done nothing. So while when we voted 50-50, if my slide will go back here. Are you going to go back? There you go. We voted about 50-50, stop the rough housing and reporting the incident. Turns out a lot of us, when it actually occurs, would walk away. We would say nothing. It's hard sometimes to step in when there's an ethical dilemma. So think about that. Do you have that courage to step in and do the right thing? Okay. So now let's go pick on an easier one. We're going to do hitching a ride. We'll have a little bit of fun with hitching a ride. So you're now going to be, I'll make you a county highway superintendent. For some of you, that would be a demotion. I know you'd rather be at the town. Some of you would rather be consultant. We're going to make you a county highway superintendent right now. And you need to go to a meeting about, 50 miles away with somebody from the State Department of Transportation. Okay, it's a meeting with the public about a project where you're getting state aid. Okay, you could do several things. What are you thinking about in this case? Are you going to drive separately with the state DOT folks? Are you going to drive together? Are you going to drive together? But promise, we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to, no discussions about the project we're driving about. So what are you going to do? Drive separately. Everybody's voting drive separately. Oh, we got one or two people. Okay. So not many of you voted for driving together, but why ethically would that actually be a good thing? You put it in the Q&A, why driving together would actually be ethically correct. Why would that actually be good to drive together? If anybody's brave enough to put that in. We're not recording this. Well, we are recording the overall, but in terms of your answers, we don't care your answers. It's less expensive. Yeah. Yeah. It's better for the environment. One car versus two. Yeah. Shared steward of resources. Absolutely. But almost all of you put in drive separately. Why did you put in drive separately? Oh, I like this one. Somebody put in you can build a relationship up together. That's actually not a bad thing to think about. Yeah. But why did most of you? Yeah, it's the appearance. If there's state aid, is there a conflict of interest where, oh, you've got these people in the car, maybe you can wiggle them for some more money, and there's issues like that. And a lot of us have policies that say we can't ride together. Okay. Now I put in C, and a couple of you voted for it. Be careful about that. If you're doing things that are on that margins, you and I might agree to drive together and not talk about it, but someone put in here, there's the appearance of conflict. If there's the appearance of conflict, later on, what's the public going to think? Oh, yeah, they promised not to talk about it, but did they really? So be careful. Some things you and I might do it, but what's the appearance to the public? Okay. Now, this case, you show up on the job site. And again, this case, it doesn't matter whether you're an engineer or supervisor, but you show up on the job site. You're not the boss, though. You can't just order people to put on their hard hats. Okay. You see no hard hats being worn. And by the way, this is a picture of a person who got hit by a tree limb, and the hard hat took the tree limb rather than the head, and they walked away without any injury. So we know hard hats are valuable, but you show up on the job site and there's no hard hats. Do you just walk away? Do you go talk to the worker or workers who don't have on the hats? Do you talk to the contractor doing the work? Do you talk to the owner, which might be the highway official, the building being put up, like that? Or do you tell OSHA, say, hey, Department of Labor, we got a problem out here. So let's see what you're doing. Most of you are talking to the contractor. Okay. Why is that? Why do we talk to the contractor? And I don't disagree with you. That's a very common answer when I've done this. Why don't talking to the contractor? Why is that going to be more successful? Why is that ethically the right thing to do? Q&A, let's see what we get here. They're running the crew. They're the most likely to be able to get change, okay? Because they can order the people to wear. The workers may not listen to you, okay? Yeah, and that's not an uncommon issue. You know, I run through work zones all the time, and I just shake my head, the flagger doing what they're doing, and I know I can't say anything because they won't listen to me. There's not a teachable moment there. If I could find the right person to talk to, I would. It frustrates me sometimes, and we've all seen situations like that. If you can talk to the owner, great. And sometimes you might do multiple things. And then, of course, at some point, if it gets to the point where they're just not listening, that's when you go to the next step and you do talk to the Department of Labor or OSHA or whomever. But the key is, if you see something, say something. Don't just walk away, because later on, if something happened, how would you feel? Okay. I'm going to go back here one because somebody put in something Q&A. It's a good answer. If you talk to the worker, how can you guarantee your message gets relayed to all the workers? And that's an excellent point. And that's why I want to go back to it. If it's one person doing it, it's one thing. But if you see a whole bunch of people and you just talk to the worker, how do you make sure everybody knows about it? So that's another reason why talking to the contractor or the owner is probably a good thing to do. Okay, so now we'll go forward. There we go. So now this is an actual picture from a bridge inspection that was done. Okay, now in New York State, we inspect bridges every 2 years as a minimum because of federal requirements, and in some cases every year if there's certain issues going on. We call them flags. So you've got a concern about scour washing away underneath the pile or the pier of the bridge. We know that's an issue because of what happened in Schoharie in 1987. You can't get in there. It's frozen. Everything is completely covered by ice and snow. So when you get that situation, what are you going to do? Okay. Are you going to not take any readings that year? Are you going to use last year's values? Are you going to call the owner of the bridge? You're going to document the frozen conditions? Or are you going to issue an updated flag? And I think you're supposed to be able to select more than one, but again, I'm not sure what the technology is. I can see the results, but I can't see if it's letting you choose more than one answer. So pick the most critical thing you would do there. So far, nobody's responding. Up here we go. Oh, this is the ranked one. That's right. This is the ranked one. So you get to rank which one you would do first. Okay. Document the frozen for those who were first thing in the Q&A. So yep, documenting the frozen conditions is the first thing we would do. Absolutely. Okay. No one's going to argue about that. Calling the owner of the bridge or the state if you're doing it via a state contract, that's good. Okay, you can't take any readings. Yeah, so that would be something to do. Okay. The two things that are in there that we probably shouldn't be doing, the one that's in fifth, it should stay in fifth. Don't use last year's values. If you can't take readings, don't use last year's readings. Somebody says come back in warmer weather. Yeah, that's actually in the standards of what you're supposed to do. You really don't even issue an updated flag. You do an issue an updated report that essentially says this flag is being held because we can't change it yet. But there's a standard in place for this. In this particular case, like it or not, they actually used last year's values, issued it as if everything were fine and dandy, nothing had changed, and they lost their engineering licensure. So when they probably should have, because it wouldn't be hard to do. Just document what you see. Okay. Now, I'm at a conference. We don't have a raffle at our conference. We've never had one. I'm not sure why, but we don't. But let's say you go to a conference that has a raffle. Okay. And let's say the prize is what I'm using to do the presentation, a nice iPad. I got an iPad mini, but that is an iPad or an iPad mini. That's the winning raffle. And you put in for the winning raffle, or it comes with the conference. Everybody gets one draw that shows up. So your name badge is your winning raffle.
David, we lost the shared screen.
You lost the shared screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's let me come back over here to Zoom. Share screen and start.
Thinking about it. Yep.
Maybe. There we go. The winning raffle. Okay.
No, we lost it on our end.
Oh no. Well, if you're in Poll EV, you can actually do the results while I get the screen shared real quick again. Okay. And let's just see here. Try this one more time. Technology. It didn't like me mentioning there was an iPad mini, I think. That's it. I'm a real iPad. What do you see now?
Does everything on your screen, including notifications, will be recorded?
Okay, cool. Okay.
Screen.
And do you see the winning raffle again?
Yes, and it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it
Okay.
does flicker, but okay, so we got results. Here we go. Okay, cool. Well, we got results then while I was fighting with the screen. So let's pat the nice iPad. You're okay, iPad. Okay, so got quite a blend. So some of you would take it home, some of you would take it to work, some of you would refuse to take it, some of you would accept if you can pay for it. I see nobody accepted it publicly and turned it back in, and that's probably good. Yeah, don't do something publicly that later on you're not going to actually do. That looks sort of silly. Okay, so refusing it, can't really argue against refusing it. Okay, though there are some people would actually say, well, look, I got paid to go, and maybe I could at least take it to work. But why would it be okay to take it home? A few of you, about 11% of you, said you can accept it and take it home. Why would that be okay? And what situation would it be okay to take it home? Let's see what people put in here in the Q&A. When would you take it home? If you paid for the conference, absolutely. Yeah, if it was your own money and you paid for the conference, absolutely take it home. If, in this case, I'm here, I'm being paid for with essentially our LTAP funds. I'd feel like I need to take it to work, but yeah, you could take it home. Maybe your company's policy allows you to do that. I mean, but you might want to check with your boss ahead of time. Just be careful though. Yeah, perception. Don't go there. Okay. You might just want to refuse it. And then the other thing is this is simple. It's not appropriate to take home if paid for by the organization. Yeah, I can't disagree with you. But again, some places that's allowed. And it's an interesting dilemma that we get into these kind of situations. Would it make a difference, by the way, if instead of everybody who was at the conference could win, only the people who work for, say, the government sector, or only people who work for the private sector could win? Would that change your answer? It would change mine, I can tell you right now. I'd be more than happy to either take it to work or home, depending upon the situation. But if they said only certain people could win, I'm like, no, I don't want to participate. If it's not a raffle, it's not a raffle. So yeah, if somebody put in there, it'd be even worse. Okay. Now let's get out into the field. Let's start talking about some more engineering kind of things. You show up on the job site, you see a contractor doing work, and you realize he's not following the spec. Okay. Maybe he's doing a chip seal and he's got a little different stone than you thought he should be using, or he's putting down a gravel layer and he's putting some stone dust on top to help it pack in place. He's not following the spec. But he says, hey, you know what I'm going to do is going to be better. It's going to save you money. So what are you going to do when he tells you that? Are you going to just ignore and say, okay, looks good, let's keep going? You're going to document what he did and keep quiet? You're going to talk to that contractor about, no, you really need to follow the spec. You're going to inform the engineer, or you're going to do a change order. And you can pick two, okay? You can pick two here. So in the Q&A, if you're not able to get the poll everywhere to work, you can actually put in two answers, okay? So talking to the contractor, informing the engineer are dominating by far, okay? C and E, okay. No one's gonna really be, I can't go crazy about that being wrong at all, okay? But a couple of you put in change orders. What's the good and bad about doing a change order? If you put in change order, why'd you want to do that? And if you didn't, why wouldn't you think about doing a change order? Why is a change order in the possibilities? And why would you think, I don't want to do a change order? Value engineering, it's not necessarily a change order depending on how you set up things. If you do that, it implies acceptance and you may or may not really know what's going on. Yeah. So yeah, just be a little careful. I'm glad to see nobody put to just ignore the problem. And in some respects, documenting it and keeping quiet is worse. We actually see that when we've been talking to folks about federal aid training we've been doing. That's actually been a known problem, is that people managing, or excuse me, inspecting and watching work being done, document things and don't tell anybody. So it becomes part of the record that there was a problem, but nobody stopped it while it was being done. So if you write something down, talk to somebody. And yeah, got it right. The first thing you need to do is talk to the contractor and the engineer before you even think about a change order. Is it really something you should be changing? Okay. Now let's go back to earlier in our project. In our projects, we're going along and we open up the bids, and there's usually a whole bunch of items and there's prices associated with each of the items. And you notice that for the paint, okay, the paint line, the price is 1 penny per gallon for a gallon of paint. Okay, 1 penny per gallon. What are you going to do when you see that? Are you going to accept that bid as submitted? Are you going to reject all the bids and start over? Are you going to ask the contractor if it's correct? Or are you going to negotiate a change order afterwards if they wind up winning?
I
Okay.
lost you again, David.
Technology is fighting me today.
It's not your friend for sure.
It is not being my friend for sure. Well, we'll let people put in the answer then while I come over here and turn back on the screen. I don't know why it's deciding to do that. When I tested it last night, it was happy and lucky, and I found a spot in the room that was working. So I'm like, I'll just leave it still. But so most of you would try to ask the contractor if that's correct. Okay, some would accept as submitted. It depends if it's contractor awarded or not. I see in the Q&A, you could ask for clarification. This is one of those classic cases whereby your policies may create some issues. I know a lot of you work for government, and in the government sector, you may not be allowed to ask the contractor if it's correct until you get to certain phases of the contract negotiation or the opening process. So think about what your policy is. If you've got a situation, you may not be able to ask the contractor if it's correct. And if you do have that as a policy, is there a way around it? The one thing you want to make sure, though, if you ask that contractor if it's correct, you really need to give the other contractors notification that you did that. That is part of what the policies are set up for, is to make sure that someone can't essentially negotiate with you privately. Okay? Accepting is submitted, I can understand that. But in the Q&A, why do you think they got a 1 penny price on the paint? What do you think the most common reasons are for a 1 penny price? There's actually 2 very common reasons people put down 1 penny. They think there's quantity issues. Yeah, they think that that one's got the wrong quantity and something else has got a different wrong quantity, so they've got a misbalanced bid. They want to win it, and then later on when they actually do quantities, they're going to make out like a bandit because there's a lot more, say, steel or a lot more grout that's needed, and that's where they've got more pricing and you've got it wrong. So you might want to check your numbers if you see something like that. Okay, but it may be an unbalanced. You may have to accept it, depending, but you may have. They may have some leftover material from another previous job. Okay, they may be front loading the project, hoping for a change order. When you see things like that, think about why that's happening. I usually tell people, if you see it, go back and check your own numbers just to make sure. You can't necessarily talk to them ahead of time, but you could talk to them later on. Okay, now what price safety? I'm going to show you 4 possible repairs for an intersection. Now these are simplified.
The screen's not shared still.
Screen's not shared. Well, I'll tell you what, Amanda, did you download that PowerPoint I sent to you?
I can.
So to download that PowerPoint I sent to you, and we can just get to that. The last half of it will be the same. So I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to go backwards for a second. Watch this track here. Okay. I'm going to talk about one, just verbally talk about error in a bridge design, and then I'll activate that item. So now you show up on a job site and it's quiet. The contractors are saying nothing. You're like, uh-oh, what's going on? And you get over there and you talk to the guys doing the work, and they show you the plans, and they go, there's a problem here in the bridge. We think there's something wrong in the plans. Oh, by the way, we called a concrete truck, and he's on his way coming with structural concrete. That structural concrete will be here in just a minute or two. Okay? So when that structural concrete gets here, okay, and Amanda, what's our status?
Loading.
She's loading. So if you've got pull everywhere up, you'll actually be able to put in, you've got your choices for your error in the bridge design. Concrete truck is coming. You can shut down the job, which means the concrete's going to be just thrown away. You could make a field change. You could notify the engineer. You could fire the engineer, or you could let the pour proceed. Which of those 5 choices, I know there are probably more, but which of those 5 would you pick on your top 2? Okay. So which would you do? You could shut down the job. You could notify the engineer. Yeah. Okay. So for those who I guess can't see it yet, notifying the engineer and shutting down the job are by far the biggest 2. Nobody's going to fire the engineering firm. That's good. Okay. A couple of people put in making a field change. Why would you not want to make a field change? Somebody want to put in the Q&A why making a field change might be a risky thing to do? Why didn't a lot of people choose that? And if you put it, why would you defend it to make a field change? You're not the engineer of record. You're not the person who did the design. Maybe there's a reason that it's that way. There could be a reason behind it. And if you accept it, you make a field change, you've accepted that liability that exists. So be very, very careful about that, okay? Letting the pour proceed could be risky. That's always a challenge that you run into. You really need to know the analysis. Unless you know it, don't just make the change. So yeah, be careful about that. This actually happened to us. It was actually rebar between a wing wall and an abutment, and it wasn't on the plan. So they had not put any steel in between the wing wall and the abutment. There are bridges designed that way. This one was just an error. Okay, it was on the sheet for the steel, but it didn't get transferred over to the plans. Why? Those things happen. We actually found some old concrete dead men. We poured the concrete in there. But just be careful about taking that over. What's our status on the slides there, Amanda? Did I lose everybody?
Just pulled. Nope, we're still here.
Okay. Okay. What am I? You're going to share a screen so I can see your
What
screen now?
slide? Yes. What slide are you on?
So now what slide am I on? I'm on the one that says error in bridge design. So that's about probably 30 or 40 down in there.
Yep. All right. We are there too.
Okay.
Yep.
You're there too. Okay. So let's see, how is this going to work? Is this going to work though? It may not. No, actually, I don't think it's going to work, Amanda, now that I'm thinking about it. So we're just going to have to go with the old-fashioned method here. But let me just try to reshare one more time, and we'll just have to fight with it because I just realized I have to go somewhere else. So what do you see now, Amanda?
Just a picture.
Just a picture. That's good.
Review.
So do you see something that says, got to see those PDHs?
No. Nope, it's
It's just fighting me.
Oh, don't you love technology? Gonna kick me out. I won't get my PDHs. Okay, so in this case, you're at a conference, you're getting your PDHs, or you're listening to Dave on some strange thing in Seattle, and you get a phone call. And you decide, do you take that phone call? Do you ignore the phone call? Do you forfeit your PDHs? Do you text the guy and say, hey, look, I'm in the middle of a session, I need to stay here? Or do you take the call and earn the PDHs? So you take the call and earn the PDHs. So you're sitting in this room trying to earn your PDHs. You try to do two things at once. Most of you are saying ignore. That's good. Okay. That's good to know. Okay. I'm glad to see that, to be honest.
What's the risk of taking the call and earning the PDHs? Why is that really a risky thing to do? I got to get my Q&A to work here. There we go, Q&A. So in the Q&A, why would trying to take the call and earning the PDHs be risky?
We lost your shared screen again, David.
Oh man, I don't know what's going on here. This is
Do you want me to
crazy.
just do it on my computer?
Well, the problem is I can't get the poll everywhere things up and running. That's the challenge. We need to have had me logged into your computer to do that. So, but if people go to polleverywhere.com, I think I can do it that way. I'm going to do something here. Give me a second. We won't discount your time, folks. We'll give you credit for that.
While you do that, I'll read the Q&A. So we have unethical. The intent is not to multitask, not paying attention to the PDHs.
Yeah.
You don't know how long the call will last. Also poor appearance, not really participating in the class. You're agreeing that you participated in the training.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. These are all important things to think about. So, yeah. So pretty important stuff. Okay. So let's come over here to activities. And this is actually should work pretty well. So the next one, now you get to listen, but it'll show up on polleverywhere.com as I do this. Let me go pick a good one here. And time-wise, we've got enough time to do this too. Oh, there's a good one. So this one I'm going to bring up. I'm going to activate. 1 bolt versus 3. So you show up on the job site, the contractor's working along, you see the contractor. This happened to me. It's an interesting one. And he's putting in 3 bolts as a connection rather than 1 big bolt. And yet the plans say that he should put in, he's put in 1 bolt, he's putting in 3. 3 is better than 1, right? So what do? You get 2 choices again. You can note this in the as-built that we changed from 1 bolt to 3, discuss it with the engineers, run some calculations of your own, so at least you don't, understand what's going on. Use the original design, and nobody's going to provide as-builts. But yeah, discuss with the engineers the first thing we're all going to do. I don't disagree with that. Use the original design. Okay. What do you think is going on here? Why do you think the contractor wanted to put in 3 bolts, and why might that be a bad idea? So in the Q&A, if somebody can tell me, because I can at least see the Q&A, why would you not want to put in 3 bolts when the spec says 1? Could be an edge distance issue. If they're having to drill out steel or something, there may not be enough edge. Yeah, it may actually weaken the structure because of the way it works. It could be engineered for a particular situation, okay? 1 bolt may actually have different stresses in it, absolutely, yeah. So there's usually reasons behind this, okay? A place I've also seen this happen is where somebody's taking and putting in the wrong kind of bolts on a rail system. If you've got guide rail and you're using the wrong kind of bolt, instead of shearing, it might be a ductile failure. It might hold them a little bit too long. So don't just assume that we're going to go with that kind of stuff. Okay. So let's go back to a different one here. Okay. We got enough time to do about 4 more anyway. There we go. Okay, now this one here, this is called thanks for a job well done. I'm going to activate that on screen. Okay, so if you're on Polivy, you should be able to see it. You show up at a diner, your job, you just finished a job with a big contracting firm. Okay, and there's a lady there who was the chief engineer on the project, and you're the contractor in this case, and she's eating. Are you going to buy her lunch? Are you going to go over and say, hey, can I buy you lunch? Are you just going to stop by and say hello? Are you going to say, hey, you're going to eat those French fries and steal one? Or are you going to do none of the above? Okay. So what are you going to do here for an answer? Most of you are just going to say hello. Some of you might ask first if it's okay. Some of you might have put in none of the above. If you're doing none of the above, throw that into the Q&A for me. Why did you choose none of the above? Which I don't disagree with. Okay. And somebody put in the Q&A just to say hello. Yeah, it could be the wrong approach. Okay. Now, the reason I've got this one in my stack, and yeah, you don't want to avoid appearances of things. Now, let's just be honest with ourselves. Maybe somebody can put in the Q&A. If I'd had this exact same question 35 years ago, what do you think the answer would have been? What did most people think the answer would have been 35 years ago? Yeah, you would have bought lunch. Yeah, everybody's putting in you buy lunch. That was what we did. Whether it was right or wrong, it is what was the standard. Standards change, okay? We have to realize that. So be careful that you don't get into ruts that, oh yeah, but that's what we've always done. How many have we heard that? Oh, we've always done it that way. That leads us to doing things wrong in engineering and can lead us into some ethical dilemmas as well, okay? So be aware of the fact that our standards change. We know that, and that's okay. Standards can change. We need to learn to change with them. Okay. Let me get another one here. Where's Speed Racer? There's Speed Racer. Okay, now you're an engineering firm. You've been asked by a town to look at possibly having a speed limit change. You did a study and you found that the speed limit needs to be left at 45 miles an hour. Your study shows actually it probably could be lowered, raised to 50 miles an hour. Okay, that's what the study actually showed. But the current speed limit is 45. The supervisor really wants the speed limit lowered to 30, and so does the board. So what are you going to recommend? Are you going to recommend leaving it at 45? You're going to recommend lowering it to 30? You're going to recommend raising it to 50, which is what the study shows? You're going to revise the study results, or are you going to do none of the above? Okay. So what are you going to do here? Most of you are going to leave the speed limit alone, even when the study says raise it by 5 miles an hour. Why is that okay? Yeah, most of you are putting in, about 80% of you are putting in, leave the speed limit as is. Yeah. Why is that okay? Because if the study says raise it, why didn't you raise it? Yeah, it's 5 miles an hour. It's not a significant difference. Somebody put in there, it's safer to lower speed. That's not necessarily true. Okay, so be very aware of that. Be careful. Lowering it to 30, which is what, oh, it'll make it safer, may actually make it less safe. But so look carefully at it. 5 miles an hour is relatively small. There's some precedents, as somebody put in the Q&A. But dropping it all the way to 30, no, that's going to get you in trouble. In some cases, it may actually make things worse. People want to have us slow down with signs. Signs aren't going to do it. As they said, most drivers are going to drive faster anyway. But that's the reason we did the study, is to see what people are actually doing, and we set it up there. Yeah, it's a super political issue. Okay. Look for other issues that you can come up with, but don't just fall into the trap of, oh yeah, you can do 30 or we'll just lower it. There is actually some value in looking at how we do speeds. Could we do different? Yeah, there are different systems out there, but just be careful. Don't just let folks change things willy-nilly, okay? And I like this one, I'm gonna put in the Q&A. I really like this. After raising the speed limit, a study a couple of years later may raise it again. Yeah, it actually is good to go back and look. It may not raise it, but remember, a lot of people drive based on what's around them, not the signs. They don't even know what the signs are, okay? So let's go back to one more. We got time for two more. Let's do two more. Since we can't show the screens, we can pick the ones here. Here we'll go with the vendor specs. Okay, so now in this particular case, you're gonna go and you're getting a new truck. You work now, I'm gonna make you be a town highway superintendent in this particular case. So again, for many of you, that's a promotion. For many of you, you're like, no, but you're gonna be buying a brand new truck. You've got a local vendor nearby who has some specifications that for a truck that you think you could use, okay? So you're gonna use those vendor specs. Are you gonna say, you know, we really like this brand of truck. We're gonna try to standardize and have the board help us standardize for this brand? Or are we gonna use other vendor specs? We wanna get out and use, you know, different brands, International and Ford and all this stuff. Or are you at least gonna send out your bids to multiple different people who sell the same piece of kind of equipment, the same International, the same Ford, things like that? So which ones are you gonna try to do? Okay, and as I finish this, I see the results changed on me quickly. And most of you are putting in get competition. Yeah, it's okay to pick one brand, okay? You can standardize. There's actually a procedure for doing that, to standardize on one brand, but you still want competition. Yeah, you want that local guy to get the work, but you really do have to send it to all the dealers who sell that particular brand if you're sticking with a particular brand, okay? The risk of going with multiple vendors, in some cases, it may hurt your operations. But again, be honest about it. If you're going to standardize, be upfront about it. That we're doing it because we have to buy less parts, that we have a better chance of the mechanics doing things right. But think about these processes before you just make a decision, okay? Yeah, good answers in the Q&A. Standardizing helps with parts, but equal or better can help too. Yeah, good answers. Okay, we got time for, let's pick one more that's a fun one here. How about, that's a good one. So you show up, you're asked as an engineer to show up on a job site to do a job inspection, and the contractor, he's not really doing what he should be doing with the steel. The welds aren't that great. The bolts are, you just don't like, you don't think it looks good. Now, you knew before you showed up, this contractor's been trying to get engineers to certify the work, and you're actually the third engineer on the job, okay? So when you see all these problems, are you gonna walk away? Are you gonna try to talk to the contractor? Are you gonna do a letter to the contractor, okay? Are you gonna do a letter to the owner? Or are you gonna do a letter to the building inspector, okay? And again, remember, you're actually the third engineering firm they've hired to try to sign off that this structure is in good shape, okay? So let's see what answers we get here. I think this is a ranked one, if I remember correctly. Yeah, this is a ranked one, okay? So in the Q&A, I got people doing letters to owners, contractor. The rankings are letter to owner, letter to contractor, talk to the contractor, letter to the building inspector, and walking away. And yes, we shouldn't walk away. And yet, think about it. You were the third engineering firm they hired, which means the first two engineering firms walked away. Can you do that? Is it going to be something you can do easily or not? So keep that in mind. It's not always easy. We know what we'd like to do, but it's not always easy when it comes to ethics to do the right thing. Okay. So keep that in mind. Now, because our connections are just not going to work well, I can't give you my conclusions, but I can tell you the conclusions. Okay, the conclusions are pretty simple. Try to think about these things before they happen. Okay, and even simple problems are going to have multiple answers. We know that. So first and foremost, what do you think we should come first? If you had to pick in the Q&A, tell me what comes first. And if you do everything around that first, you'll be in good shape. Okay. And I know some people have to leave, and we're going to be done here literally in just about 30 seconds. What would be the first thing you think about doing? Okay. Public safety. Yeah. Public safety. If you keep safety, health, and welfare first and foremost in your mind, everybody will win. So keep that in mind. You're all going to come across little things when you're traveling. You see them. I came across a person doing a trench when I was in Columbus, Ohio once. What do you do? Think through the public health issues, health, welfare, and safety, and you're going to be in great shape. I've got 7 o'clock here in Seattle. I'm going to go down and get my coffee, which I haven't had yet, my breakfast. Thank you for joining us with our lovely technology today. We do have more webinars coming up, one on intersections next week. I'm doing it, but I'll be back in Ithaca, so I should have good internet connection, and we hope to see you there. And we do have some other engineering workshops. We're having to cancel one, but we got some others, so please sign up, go to our website, and have yourself a great rest of the summer. Hope to see you in person. Thanks. Bye-bye. Take care.